Hello everyone, as we are going to start with our audiobook series of Indian polity. Today we are going to continue with chapter number 3. Salient features of the Constitution. The Indian Constitution is unique in its contents and spirit. Though borrowed from almost every constitution of the world, the Constitution of India has several salient features that distinguish it from the constitution of the other countries. It should be noted at the outset that a number of original features of the Constitution, as adopted in 1949, have undergone a substantial change on account of several amendments, particularly 7th, 42nd, 44th, 73rd, 74th, 97th, and 101st Amendments. In fact, the 42nd Amendment Act 1976 is known as Mini Constitution due to the important and large number of changes made by it in various parts of the Constitution. However, in Keshav Nanda Bharti case 1973, the Supreme Court ruled that the constituent power of Parliament under Article 368 does not enable it to alter the basic structure of the Constitution. Salient features of the Constitution. The salient features of the Constitution as it stands today are as follows. First, lengthiest written Constitution. Constitutions are classified into written, like the American Constitution, or unwritten, like the British Constitution. The Constitution of India is the lengthiest of all the written constitutions of the world. It is very comprehensive, elaborate, and detailed document. Originally, 1949, the Constitution contained a preamble, 395 articles, divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. Presently, 2019, it contains a preamble, about 470 articles divided into 25 parts and 12 schedules. The various amendments carried out since 1951 have deleted about 20 articles in 1 part 7 and added about 95 articles, 4 parts 4A, 9A, 9B and 14A, and 4 schedules 9, 10, 11 and 12. No other constitution in the world has so many articles and schedules. 4 factors that have contributed to the elephantine size of our constitution. They are A. Geographical factors, that is the vastness of the country and its diversity. B. Historical factors, example, the influence of the Government of India Act of 1935, which was bulky. C. Single constitution for both the center and states. D. Dominance of legal luminaries in the Constituent Assembly. The Constitution contains not only the fundamental principle of governance, but also detailed administrative provisions. Further, those matters which in other modern democratic countries have been left to the ordinary legislation or established political conventions have also been included in the constitutional documents itself in India, drawn from various resources. The Constitution of India has borrowed most of its provision from the Constitution of various other countries as well as from Government of India Act of 1935. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar proudly acclaimed that the Constitution of India has been framed after transcending all the known constitution of the world. The structural part of the Constitution is to a large extent derived from the Government of India Act of 1935. The philosophical part of the Constitution, the fundamental rights and the directive principle of state policy derive their inspiration from the American and Irish Constitution respectively. The political part of the Constitution, the principle of cabinet government, and the relation between the executive and the legislature have been largely drawn from the British Constitution. The other provisions of the Constitution have been drawn from the constitutions of Canada, Australia, Germany, USSR, now Russia, France, South Africa, Japan, and so on. The most profound influence and the material source of the Constitution is the Government of India Act 1935. The federal scheme, judiciary, governors, emergency powers, the public service commissions, and the most of the administrative details are drawn from this act. More than half of the provisions of Constitution are identical to or bear a close resemblance to the Act of 1935, blend of rigidity and flexibility. Constitutions are also classified into rigid and flexible. A rigid constitution is the one that requires a special procedure for its amendment, as for example the American Constitution. A flexible constitution, on the other hand, is one that can be amended in the same manner as the ordinary laws are made. For example, the British Constitution. The Constitution of India is neither rigid nor flexible, but a synthesis of both. Article 368 provides for two types of amendments. A. Some provisions can be amended by the special majority of the Parliament, that is, two-thirds majority of the members of each house present and voting, and majority of the total membership of each house. Some other provisions can be amended by the special majority of the Parliament and with the ratification by half of the total state at the same time. Some provisions of the Constitution can be amended by a simple majority of a Parliament in a manner ordinarily legislative process. Notably, these amendments do not come under Article 368. Fourth, federal system with unitary bias. The Constitution of India establishes a federal system of government. It contains all the usual features of a federation, viz. Two government, division of powers, written constitution, supremacy of constitution, rigidity of constitution, independent judiciary, and bicameralism. However, the Indian Constitution also contains a large number of unitary or non-federal features, viz. A strong center, single constitution, single citizenship, flexibility of constitution, integrated judiciary, appointment of the state governor by the center, all India services, emergency provisions, and so on. However, the Indian Constitution also contains a large number of unitary or non-federal features. Flexibility of constitution, integrated judiciary, appointment of state governor by the center, all India services, emergency provisions, and so on. Moreover, the term federation has nowhere been used in the Constitution. Article 1, on the other hand, describes India as a union of states, which implies two things. 1. Indian federation is not a result of an agreement by the states, and 2. No state has the right to secede from the federation. Hence, the Indian Constitution has been variously described as a federal in form but unitary in spirit. Quasi-federal by Casey Ware, bargaining federalism by Maurice Jones, corporative federalism by Granville Austin, federation with a centralizing tendency by Avor Jennings, and so on. Parliamentary form of government. The Constitution of India has opted for the British parliamentary system of government rather than American presidential system of government. The parliamentary system is based on the principle of cooperation and coordination between the legislative and executive organs, while the presidential system is based on the doctrine of separation of powers between the two organs. The parliamentary system is also known as the Westminster model of the government, responsible for government and cabinet government. The Constitution established the parliament system not only at the center but also in the states. The features of the parliamentary government in India are: A. Presence of nominal and real executives, majority party rule, collective responsibility of the executive to the legislature, membership of the ministers in the legislature, leadership of the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister, dissolution of the lower house, Lok Sabha or Assembly. Even though the Indian parliamentary system is largely based on the British pattern, there are some fundamental differences between the two. For example, the Indian Parliament is not a sovereign body like the British Parliament. Further, the Indian state has an elected head, republic, while the British state has an hereditary head, monarchy. In parliamentary system, whether in India or Britain, the role of the Prime Minister has become so significant and crucial that the political scientists like to call it a prime ministerial government. Sixth, synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. The doctrine of the sovereignty of the parliament is associated with the British Parliament, while the principle of the judicial supremacy with that of American Supreme Court. Just as the Indian parliament system differs from the British system, the scope of the judicial review power of the Supreme Court in India is narrower than that of what exists in US. This is because the American Constitution provides for the due process of law against that of procedure established by law contained in the Indian Constitution. Therefore, the framers of the Indian Constitution have preferred a proper synthesis between the British principle of parliamentary sovereignty and American principle of judicial supremacy. The Supreme Court, on the one hand, can declare the parliamentary laws as unconstitutional through its power of judicial review. The Parliament, on the other hand, can amend the major portion of the Constitution through its constituent power. Integrated and independent judiciary. The Indian Constitution established a judicial system that is integrated as well as independent. The Supreme Court stands at the top of the integrated judicial system in the country. Below it, there are several high courts at the state level. Under a high court, there is a hierarchy of subordinate courts, that is, district courts and other lower courts. The single system of courts enforces both the central laws as well as the state laws, unlike in USA, where the federal laws are enforced by the federal judiciary and the state laws are enforced by the state judiciary. The Supreme Court is a federal court, the highest court of appeal, the guarantor of fundamental rights of the citizen, and the guardian of Constitution. Hence, the Constitution has made various provisions to ensure its independence, security of tenure of judges, fixed service condition for the judges, all the expenses of the Supreme Court charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, prohibition on discussion on the conduct of judges in the legislatures, ban on practice of the retirement, power to punish for its contempt vested in the Supreme Court, separation of judiciary from the executive, and so on. Fundamental rights. Part 3 of the Constitution guarantees 6 fundamental rights to all the citizens: right to equality, right to freedom, right to exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, right to constitutional remedies. The fundamental rights are meant for promoting the idea of political democracy. They operate as limitation on the tyranny of the executive and arbitrary laws of the legislature. They are justiciable in nature, that is, they are enforceable by the courts for their violation. The aggrieved person can directly go to the Supreme Court, which can issue writs of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto for the restoration of these rights. However, the fundamental rights are not absolute and subject to reasonable restrictions. Further, they are not sacrosanct can be curtailed or repealed by the Parliament through a constitutional amendment act. They can also be suspended during the operation of national emergency, except the rights guaranteed by Article 20 and 21.